The thing about being young is it's kind of a synonym for ignorance. You can be smart when you're young and you can be educated, and that helps a lot if you're educated in facts. Ben was talking about Gen Z and sort of he was sort of railing against them, saying, they complain all the time. They have it so tough. They can't buy a house. They can't do this. They can't do that. But he said, the only generation that ever really had it easy was mine. The boomers had it easy. We had a great life, and it was amazing. You didn't really have to go to war. There was no draft. When there was a crash in 2008, it was barely a crash because we had so much money stored up that we could just weather it by spending, which is all, of course, we ever do. Many generations have had it much, much harder than Gen Z. Michael Knowles, I hate to say this, he made a really good point. He said that Gen Z in many ways has it easy, but in many ways does have it hard, and that they were raised without any spiritual knowledge, without any wisdom, without any religion, without any kind of knowledge of our traditions. In fact, I would go beyond that and say they were schooled in ignorance. And so people are watching them and seeing who they're going to be. And this is always kind of a fool's game. It's always kind of a fool's game to predict who the young generation is going to be, because the thing about being young is it's kind of a synonym for ignorance, right? You can be smart when you're young. You can be incredibly smart, and you can be educated, and that helps a lot. But if you're educated in facts, but you can't be experienced. You just can't. You cannot know the things that you learn as you get older. As you get older, there are things that changes that on your attitude that come upon you because you are older, and you wouldn't want young people to be as cautious as old people, or as held back, or as relaxed as older people. You want them to be go-getters, and you want them to be out there. However, you also come upon wisdom. You know things, you've seen things several times before, and you know to react with in a measured way that young people simply don't know how to do. So young people, when I read, for instance, a recent study that says 6 in 10 Zoomers like socialism. No wonder they're hoodwinked by Zoran Mondani. This is a story in the New York Post, and apparently a majority of them voted for Mondani, gave him a big push. Says Zoran Mondani I can barely pronounce this guy's name. It must be psychological. It's like Freudian. I don't even want to think about it. Owes his primary victory to young New Yorkers' fiscal anxiety paired with their economic illiteracy. The majority of, she says, my generation is warm to socialism thanks to our education system's failure to equip us with the knowledge of history and economics required to debunk the shiny promise of free things. But you do wonder, one of the things about socialism is it always ends up in disaster every single time. Nobody is stuck with it, except for countries like North Korea that just become tyrannies. Poverty follows, tyranny always follows. It is tyranny because it's giving the government power to disperse your earnings, which are not just filthy lucre. It's also a measure of how you spent your time and what you did with your time. Your money is your life. The old joke about your money or your life. Your money is your life because it represents what you did with your time. And to give that over to the government is to give away your freedom. And then, there's this kind of idea. So young people may be favorable towards socialism until they see it. And then suddenly you realize, oh, wait, now it's not as much fun as I thought it was. They like free stuff. Everybody likes free stuff. Once you give the government the power to give you free stuff, because nothing is free, what you're giving away is you're giving away your freedom. When you give the government the power to get free stuff, you don't get it back. That's why Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism is a lie. You vote your way in, you shoot your way out. I think that Ayn Rand, as much as I dislike her, I think she's the one who said that. You vote your way in, you shoot your way out. And the other thing is that Gen Z gets hit a lot for not being able to handle life, for being snowflakes, for saying that, employers are often unhappy with Gen Z employees, saying they don't come in on time or they quit if they have to come in, if they can't work remotely and all this stuff. And a lot of this, is reflected in the kind of bad work habits and the whining and the complaining and all this stuff. I will say this, though. And there's also one other thing I should add, that there are studies that show that younger Gen Z people, young teenagers, young adults, and older Gen Z people above the age of 18, have different points of view, that the older ones tend to get a little bit more conservative. And this is the thing I want to say. There's an influencer, a Gen Z influencer named Savannah Fure. I know nothing about her except this clip that I found because I've been hearing this. And here is something that she's saying about Gen Zers, that they are actually coming back to more traditional ways.
The number of riots, the number of illegal migrants coming into the country, pricing of houses going up. You know that the majority of Hollywood and celebrities are left-leaning, and yet they're all so irrelevant to us working class. The majority of Americans can't even afford eggs right now. Everybody is all of a sudden leaning towards being a trad wife, and all of a sudden women are realizing that it actually kind of sucks being controlled by all these feminist ideologies, and people are trying to bring back families. You can see how desperate our generation is for truth and just to go back to what it used to be for our other parents' generations and the way they grew up.
It is interesting that the thing that everybody is missing is the 1950s, this period of prosperity, order. You know, there were lots of protests, but protests tend to come along with order. The three things that come together: sexual restraint, happiness and productivity in a country, and liberalizing protests. Those three things go together. The Victorian era the same way. We think of the Victorian era as very, very restrained when it comes to sex. It was incredibly productive. The British essentially took over the entire world, took over the planet. Incredible science, incredible politics, but it was also a very liberalizing time. The vote was spread to more people, and there were a lot of protests and that made the government become more liberal over time. And so the idea that Gen Z might start to look back at the 50s and start to think like, hey, wait a minute, we kept being told, oh, we don't want to go back to the 50s, but maybe we do. That seems to me very possible. And I also have to say, my own experience, which of course is limited, just by being my own, but I keep meeting conservative Gen Zers who are great. They're just great. The people who've just gotten out of college, amazing, much more, the ladies much more ladylike, the men much less nerdy and kind of, how can I put it, much less likely to be kind of pulled into themselves, much more manly, I guess I would say. The attraction, as that woman just said, to more productive, traditional ways of life, by which I mean traditional ways of life that produce more children, seems to appeal to them. I'm finding that extremely encouraging. I'm not a nostalgic person at all. I'm always interested to know what's going to happen next. I'm not really interested in going back anywhere. I was alive, I was alive in the 50s, but not alert. But I was alive in that period of the 60s that was really what we think of when we think of the 50s, the early 60s. And there were, of course, problems then, just like there are always problems with human beings. But it was a better time. And even the movements that made life more equal for women and better for blacks, I think were movements that came out of that time with sexual restraint and with family building and with traditions. But at the same time, like I said, I think this is a new world and a new thing, and I want to see new things happen and new developments happen. And I just think the one thing that I've been nostalgic about in my life are ladies. I miss ladies. There were a couple of generations there where they disappeared. I think they wanted to be there. I just don't think there were gentlemen to treat them like ladies, so there was no reason for them to be ladies. And I think, that value disappeared. When I heard young men, and these are men above Gen Z, praising Andrew Tate, I just wanted to weep. I just would turn to them and say, this guy's a pimp. What are you talking about? This is not your role model. This is not your role model. I think something new is happening. I do believe that. I am a terminally optimistic person, constantly optimistic, but still, I think that there is a new thing coming. That awakening, that religious awakening I've been waiting for has not arrived. But I think that there's a chance that it could arrive. And that is one of the reasons that I'm speaking out, not just against the left, who I think are beyond redemption, but I think those voices on the right that are trying to lead us astray, because I think we're going to need the right. We're going to need the middle. We're going to need the true right and the true left to lead these young people into a better life. And I think they can do it. For more great content, like and subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.